Iran. It's been one of the U.S.'s biggest enemies for the past 4 decades. The world's image of the country is one of religious repression, violent protests, angry leaders giving fiery speeches, and police crackdowns. But underneath this volatile exterior, there lies one of the world's oldest civilizations, dating back 6,000 years. Iran sits on one of the world's largest stockpiles of energy and minerals, and today it has an educated population that, if given the chance, could create one of the world's most powerful economies. Instead, it has a weak economy, and its one significant source of wealth is the country's vast stocks of oil and gas. If Iran's per capita GDP were equal to that of its neighbors, Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, 2 other oil-rich countries, it would have an economy worth $5 or $6 trillion per year, enough to make it the 3rd or 4th largest in the world. But instead, Iran has an economy worth just $368 billion, making it the 43rd largest in the world. The country has been held back for decades by sanctions from the West, a lack of foreign investment, and a government that's more interested in maintaining control of the country than in helping its citizens build a better quality of life. And just recently, something seems to have gone seriously wrong with Iran's economy. For decades, the government published monthly statistics on the country's inflation rate, but now it has stopped. The last numbers were for February 2023, showing inflation hitting 47.7% on an annual basis. Experts speculate that in the months since then, inflation has exceeded 49%, which would make it the worst inflation the country has ever seen. Amid rising prices, millions of Iranians have fallen into poverty, and public protests are on the rise. The local currency, the rial, has lost 1/3 of its value this year alone, and the cost of chicken soared by 30% in just 1 month this year. Many blame the latest round of Western sanctions against Iran for the inflation crisis, but Iran's economic problems run much deeper than that. So why is inflation striking the country so hard? Why is Iran so much poorer than many of its neighboring countries? And can it get itself out of this mess? In this video, we'll answer these questions, but before we go any further, hit the subscribe button to get notifications on our latest videos on the world of economics. And if you like this video, hit the like button and help us spread the word. Iran's economic progress ground to a halt in 1979 when an Islamist revolution broke out and the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, was overthrown. The Shah had been an ally of the US and the West during the Cold War, and many in the country felt the Shah had allowed Iran to become a pawn of the United States, or even a de facto colony. Many remembered the coup of 1953 when the Shah's prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, was removed from power with the help of the United States because he had tried to nationalize the country's oil industry, which was controlled by the British. In 1979, resentment against the West reached a boiling point, and the revolution brought to power the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, who transformed Iran into an Islamic republic. This shocked much of the world and even many Iranians, because Iran had become a secular society in the decades before. Iranians dressed like Westerners, listened to rock and roll, and drank Coca-Cola. All that came to an end in 1979. Ayatollah Khomeini did what Mohammad Mossadegh couldn't. He nationalized the oil industry. But he didn't stop there. He kept on nationalizing various parts of the economy. Just 6 months after seizing power, the Ayatollah took control of 28 private banks that held 44% of all bank assets in the country. At the same time, the government took control of all the automakers, as well as the aluminum, copper, and steel industries. The government also seized the assets of 51 wealthy industrialists, along with the wealth held by their relatives. This nationalized economy remains in place to this day. It's estimated that as of 2006, 70% of Iran's economy was under the direct control of the government. To manage all these industries, the Ayatollah's government set up a new kind of institution known as the Banyad. These banyads were originally meant to be religious charitable organizations to help Iran's poorest people, as well as those who had helped with the revolution. The country's revolutionary court seized the assets of people and businesses accused of being against the revolution and gave them to the banyads. These banyads were made tax-exempt, and eventually they were also exempted from auditing and general accounting regulations. They pay no taxes, don't have to account for their spending, and don't even have to keep track of their money. For these reasons, they have become the very epicenter of corruption in Iran. The largest of these banyads was called the Foundation of the Oppressed and War Veterans. During the 1980s, it became the largest holding company in the Middle East, controlling more than 400 businesses in everything from finance to food and beverages to construction to 5-star hotels. Today, banyads are responsible for 20% of Iran's economic output and employ about 10% of all working people in the country. Are the banyads actually helping the poor as they should be? It's hard to say, since they don't account for the money they spend. But it's clear the banyads have become a major way through which Iran's revolutionary elite have made themselves very rich and very powerful. And this is the true purpose of bonyads, to keep the country's Islamist rule elite in power no matter what. They've also kept Iran's economy from growing. With no public accountability and no need to turn a profit, the businesses run by bonyads are inefficient, money-losing enterprises. Many of them are subsidized by the state despite the massive assets they own. Bonyads are also a major reason why Iran has seen so little foreign investment. Who wants to invest in a country where your investments can be nationalized by a revolutionary court at any moment? Not to mention, whatever industry you invest in, you'll be competing with a bonyad that pays no taxes and has the backing of the country's all-powerful government. But it doesn't matter, because the real purpose of Iran's economy as it exists today is to keep the ruling elites in charge. With so much wealth in their hands and with their control of a powerful military and state police apparatus, plus full political control of the courts, Iran's rulers don't have to listen to the people. They don't have to follow policies that would make Iran better off, and they don't. From the start, Iran's revolutionary rulers were willing to sacrifice the people for their own power and glory. Within a year of the revolution, Iran went to war against Iraq. That war lasted from 1980 to 1988. 300,000 Iranians died, another 500,000 were injured, and the financial cost to Iran was around $500 billion. War and the bonyads weren't the only things keeping Iran poor. There are also endless rounds of economic sanctions that the country has seen since 1979, from the United States, from other Western countries, and eventually, even from the United Nations. The first round of sanctions against Iran came from the US in 1979, when a group of revolutionaries stormed the US embassy in Tehran and took 52 Americans hostage. The U.S. lifted those sanctions in 1981, shortly after the hostages were released. But the Reagan administration brought the sanctions back over the course of the 1980s, first because of the Iran-Iraq War, and then because of Iranian attacks on the U.S. and other foreign ships in the Persian Gulf. In 1995, as word spread that Iran was working on a nuclear weapons program, President Bill Clinton expanded the U.S. sanctions against Iran to include the country's oil and gas sector. This was Iran's main source of money from abroad. Clinton also expanded the sanctions to any company doing business with the Iranian government. In Iran's economy, where so much industry is controlled by the government, that meant sanctions against almost every major business in the country. Since then, the sanctions against Iran have kept coming and going. In 2006, the United Nations passed the first global sanctions against Iran over its uranium enrichment program, designed to make weapons-grade uranium for nuclear bombs. Those sanctions froze the international assets of businesses involved in the uranium program, but Iran's rulers kept on with the program, so over the next few years the UN expanded the sanctions to include more asset freezes and the monitoring of Iranian banks. In 2012, the European Union joined the sanctions against Iran, and theirs were much harsher. Among other things, Iran was banned from the SWIFT payment system that facilitates the movement of currencies between countries. Iran was becoming a pariah state. Then in 2015, many of those sanctions were removed after Iran came to an agreement with a group of Western countries, including the US, to suspend its uranium enrichment program. But the agreement didn't last. In 2018, President Donald Trump withdrew the U.S. from the deal and slapped new sanctions on Iran, including eventually sanctions on the country's financial sector. All these sanctions have had a brutal effect on Iran's economy, and one statistic highlights this better than any other. Since 2012, when Iran was cut off from the SWIFT payment system, its GDP has fallen by half, from around $600 billion in 2012 to its current $368 billion. Like many other developing countries, Iran's economy has suffered horribly since the COVID-19 pandemic. When inflation spread around the world in 2021, it hit Iran particularly hard. The country's currency was already unstable thanks to decades of sanctions, and the country has seen persistently high inflation. But the global inflation explosion made things even worse in Iran. Its annual inflation rate jumped from 18% in 2018 to 43% by 2021. At the beginning of 2023, the country saw a sudden spike in unemployment from 8.2% in January to 9.7% in February. Something has broken in Iran's economy, but with the government being increasingly secretive about the data, it's hard to say what exactly is going on. And on top of that, an alarming new trend is emerging. According to the secret government documents obtained by the Times of London, Iran's Revolutionary Guard, the part of its military dedicated to internal control of the country, has been seizing control of the economy since 2020. These documents showed that 2/3 of the country's oil production, about 1 million barrels out of a total of 1.46 million barrels produced daily, is reserved for quote-unquote investors including affiliated companies of the armed forces. On top of that, the documents revealed the existence of a $100 billion slush fund controlled by the country's leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. It's clear that more than 40 years after the revolution, Iran's powerful elites aren't about to let go of their near-total control of the economy. And as long as that's the case, Iran's population will continue to struggle under the weight of a government that has taken all the wealth and power for itself. If you like this video, please hit the like button and help us spread the word. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to get notifications on our latest news and analysis about economics around the world. In the meantime, check out one of these videos here to learn more. Thanks for watching.